Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dustin Daugherty. I'm an associate with Dustin here in our Vietnam offices in Ho Chi Minh City. With me too is my colleague Oscar.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Today we're gonna review an excellent year. 2016 has been pretty active down here in Vietnam. We are gonna tell you about the updates to come in 2017 as well. So I think Dustin's been a good year so far. Lots of things going on. Free trade agreements, new regulations coming into place. Perhaps it's not the time for multi-trade agreements. Maybe more on, they're starting to get more focused on bilateral agreements, but we'll see what the new year brings.
No, I think it's on the whole, it's been a good year for Vietnam. Good year for us personally, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe 2017 can be even better for both. So again, thanks for joining. Questions. If you could please write any questions you have along the way I believe you should be given a box or something like that to ask questions, or even into the comments section. Then we're going to save that and we're going to reach out to all of you by email afterwards answering them. It's very busy down here, so unfortunately for time constraints we can't answer questions live here, but we will get back as soon as we can with any questions. And with that, I think we can start.
Yeah.
Yeah, so looking back on Vietnam this year, 2016, sorry, it got frozen for a moment. There we go. So I think, foreign investors coming into the country, if they're going into any country, this is not just Vietnam, one of the first questions will be, what's the tax situation, especially corporate income tax. So anytime there's a change in the headline rate for corporate profits, that's newsworthy, and Vietnam has been better than most in bringing it down. It has sort of a timetable. It's come down since, I believe, 25% in the last few years. But this year, of note, the corporate income tax has been reduced from 22 to 20%, which is definitely a significant change. In the below table, you'll see some other tax rates. Those did not change this year. So the personal income tax is still on a progressive tax basis, going up to 35%. Withholding tax is set down in different tax treaties, and then the VAT is depending on the class of goods. But it's a very positive move. It shows Vietnam's continued support to make it a more business-friendly environment, bringing it down to 20%. And I know there's talk of bringing it down to 17% in the next couple of years. So maybe not next year, but we should see that eventually. And then just to give you an idea, this isn't necessarily an update for this year, but understanding this new rate, how does Vietnam stack up in the region? And I think you'll see it's the blue line right there in the middle of the chart. It's pretty favorable. So yeah, sorry, it's the purple line, excuse me. So it's pretty favorable, only Cambodia matches it, and then otherwise Brunei and Singapore best it. So those are all very different economies. Cambodia has a small labor pool. It can't compete on that basis. Brunei gets limited investment, and then Singapore we know is developed and used as a hub and really captures a different sort of investment. So I think for Vietnam's stage of development, its large labor pool, this is a very, very attractive tax rate to enjoy. Then in some more technical specific updates, so this year Circular 59 came out, which clarified a few aspects of the overall guidance for the social insurance law. So basically the social insurance law are the obligations due by both the employer and the employee, and comes in the form of a tax added on the salary. So it covers things like social insurance, health insurance, unemployment insurance. Basically there were two main takeaways from this update. The first one being how salary is defined within the law. So that will have an impact basically on how compensation packages are structured because different types of reimbursements get taxed differently. So what an actual salary is from a tax perspective has been updated. And then the illness benefits, that's another concern for employers. So regarding the salary, you'll see on the table basically with this circular, with this update, we now have some clear information about what is included in the concept of a salary in terms of allowances and what are excluded. And you know, these might seem small or even arbitrary, but for very large organizations or for highly paid individuals, I mean, a small shift in what's considered a salary can make a big difference on the bottom line for social insurance tax. So it's something that should be, you know, watched carefully, and it also impacts the way you're going to structure a contract, right? Because if you can add more allowances in an area that aren't going to be taxed for social insurance, then it's in an employer's interest to do so. So I think that's significant, and it's important that we cover it. Regarding the way illness benefits are calculated, there's been a number of changes, mostly for compensation for sick leave. So a few of these have gotten more favorable to the employer, and then some have gotten more unfavorable to the employee. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but basically it's gotten a bit more generous to the employee for compensation for sick leave on terms of the daily rate. The benefit level for basically convalescence or resting time has been simplified. You don't have this two-tiered system anymore of a different rate that you get at home compared with at a hospital or health center. So now it's a flat rate of 30% from the beginning of this year, of full salary, that is. That said, the rate, the percentage of full salary that an employee is entitled to, if they still require additional treatment after 180 days, has gone up slightly, by 5% to 50%. And that is subject to social insurance contributions. So it's important to take a note of that. In terms of one of the bigger news stories for the year is, of course, the National Congress for the Communist Party. This is a big update. So earlier this year, Vietnam had its 12th National Congress Party, and it was kind of a seminal year because it was a leadership transition. So this happens once every few years. Notable was the prime minister move. So you had Win Tan Yung in previous years, who was seen as quite business friendly, friendlier to the West, maybe a little more liberal. He wanted to stay on, it said, but he was brought out and replaced by Nguyen Xuan Phuc. So some people had viewed that as a negative move for foreign investment, but in reality, nothing has really changed. It's largely the same group with a collective leadership over the country. And I think that what we've seen after it really affirms, A, the political stability of Vietnam, and B, the continued commitment of the government to foreign investment and making Vietnam a more attractive country to do business in. Now, we've been talking about the European Union Vietnam FTA for several years now, so this might not seem like anything new, but this year has been an important year logistically in a way. So at the end of 2015, there was agreement to the text of the treaty. So this year has seen some progress in turning that agreement into an actual enforceable trade pact. So you might know that the agreement would need to be ratified by the governments of every single EU state, which you can imagine is quite a time-consuming procedure. So, of course, the text of the treaty has to be translated. That occurred this year. And there's been more agreement basically on tightening up the legal language, so to avoid any disputes in the future, to make it easier to pass through these national parliaments. So we're very hopeful that from next year, perhaps we can start to see the dividends in practice from a tax perspective, because it is set to, I think on the Vietnam side, get rid of like 99% of tariffs on EU goods. So that's a major point for EU sellers and EU companies looking to do business in Vietnam. We've seen already an influx of foreign investment from this treaty, even though it's not in effect. And I think this year was an important year for its progress, though maybe not too many big headlines. It's been a year of steady improvement. Vietnam, the government also came out with some guidance essentially for public-private partnerships this year at the beginning of March, specifically for drafting proposals for it and feasibility studies. I personally think this is important because, as a lot of you probably know, there's a huge need for infrastructure in the country, and other developing countries have found that this infrastructure gap can be done, can be improved essentially through partnerships between the government and private investors. But there's been a common complaint from investors saying there isn't enough guidance, it's not clear how to execute these things, it's not clear how the government decides tender contracts, how they decide the people who win the bids. So essentially, this is a step in the right direction for adding clarity. There were some real tangible steps given for how feasibility studies and proposals should be drafted for PPP projects and how they should be considered by the government. So again, I think you can see this as a turning point towards an influx of more PPP projects to kind of meet the need for greater infrastructure in Vietnam. And again, I mean, specifically, if we're talking about the type of infrastructure Vietnam needs and how PPP can help bridge that gap, I mean, no pun intended, it needs bridges, it needs roads, it needs railways, especially along the coast, upgrades to the roads. But then we have the very widely publicized metro programs in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. Ho Chi Minh City, for instance, just to give one example, I mean, they are still looking for money for the later rounds building for the extra lines. So hopefully, with this greater, clarity that can kind of formalize the bidding process for these later lines, the capital injection, make it smooth, and have it be delivered on time. Because everybody agrees, from the World Bank to the ADB, that there's a huge dividend to be gotten for Vietnam's economy from increased investment in infrastructure. Free trade areas. This is an interesting one because we all know that on one hand, free trade is kind of taking a step backwards with some of the protectionist moves being taken in the West. I mean, we all know the Trump situation, his words about the TPP, which we'll cover later. But there was some interesting talk at a summit in Hanoi this year from the Prime Minister about a massive free trade agreement with 55 partners. That would include all G7 member states and 15 members from the G20. It's still very much in the premature, early stages, but it's something that they want to do. Vietnam clearly stands to benefit from free trade, and Vietnam is taking a lot of administrative moves in terms of cleaning up its own legislation, administrative processes. Just today, some news came out about a number of processes which will be streamlined and simplified, like licensing procedures from the Ministry of Industry and Trade. So, in order to meet international standards, this is something Vietnam needs to do. Vietnam clearly wants to continue with these FTAs. So whether or not they come to fruition on a multilateral basis, just wanting to accede to them is leading Vietnam to take some positive steps in terms of its business reform. And they also need to keep pace with their ASEAN peers because there's a competition going on, certainly, to capture FDI outflow from China. So this is on this is on Vietnam's radar, and it's going to be something they continue to do. In terms of tax administration, so Vietnam basically is set in some new guidelines for how tax should be administrated from the beginning of July. One headline area was the late fees. So changes show that interest on late payments will fall to just 0.03% of total tax due, or that comes to a yearly rate of around 11%. So hopefully that will, from the government's perspective, help to boost revenues and induce more people to come within the formal economy and pay tax. But I think the more important updates for tax came on the updates for special consumption tax and value added tax. So again, this same update in July, the special consumption tax was changed for automobiles. Some of you might know that automobiles in Vietnam are taxed at a very, very high rate. That is the extra tax, the special consumption tax, essentially. So this move changed that for automobiles with 24 seats or less. So that, I think that's most private automobiles. The tax rates still vary based on how many seats you have. So you'll have a different rate for vans or for 4-seat sedans. But it shows that Vietnam is slowly but surely lowering the rates on that to kind of get more cars on the road. Whether or not Vietnam's infrastructure is ready for that is a different question, but it's becoming a more attractive country for car makers. And then there were 2 updates for value-added tax. On one hand, you had an increased number of exemptions added. So you had exemptions given, for instance, on the provision of goods for elderly care. So those providing services for geriatrics and other forms of elderly care, will be exempt from VAT. Other areas of exemption will be for activities which are highly resource intensive. So if natural resources make up basically 51% of the cost of the final good in the production process, there are exemptions given for VAT. So I think that's interesting to note. But at the same time, while there are more exemptions given, the VAT refunds were also restricted. So a lot of incentives which were given to investment projects, but then those projects, the capital has not been fully contributed. All VAT exemptions or incentives will be removed from those. Companies which have accumulated in excess of 12 months worth of VAT to be refunded are now prevented from doing so. Instead, it must be carried forward into future years. And then in the export sector, VAT refunds accessible through the VAT refund first, tax and audit later scheme is now limited to entities which have basically a clean record with the customs and tax authorities for the last 2 years, not tax offenders. So on one hand, on the VAT front, you have a loosening of regulations and more exemptions given. At the same time, they are getting a bit stricter, so some of those incentives offered are not being taken advantage of. And then this got a lot of coverage because it affects a lot of investors in Vietnam and even tourists. U.S. visitors are now eligible for a 1-year visa, which sounds like a great thing, and it is, but like a lot of things, there was a lot of confusion in its rollout because they seem to have gotten rid of the 1- and 3-month visa classes for U.S. visitors. So now everybody is required for the 1-year visa, and you can get multiple entry, of course, but for tourists who are coming here with a $25 stamping fee 1-month visa, they are now required to get a 1-year visa. But for business people, it's a lot more convenient. It basically rolls all the 3-month visas that people would get into one. So I think while it's questionable whether they should have gotten rid of the shorter visa classes, it's definitely a good move. It shows that they're opening to more investment. They're willing to have business people stay in their country because they see the benefit. And then, of course, you have the Eurasian Economic Union, which is sometimes overlooked in the West. This is led by Russia. Last year, they finished a free trade agreement with Vietnam. Basically, the free trade agreement has come into effect as of this October. And while trade flows are smaller compared to the EU or US, it's still an important trading partner. Vietnam and Russia, and previously the Soviet Union, have a very close and long-standing economic relationship. So there are 3 stages of tariff cuts within this agreement. So the first stage is currently happening from entry into force in this October to the end of this year. The next stage will be from next year, and then the final stage will be the year after that, so 2018. So it's going to provide a huge opportunity for EAEU, that is the Eurasian Union based companies, to sell into Vietnam, or if those companies wish to open up a subsidiary here in Vietnam as a export hub for all of Southeast Asia, Vietnam is now arguably the best choice to do that.
So let's go now to see what's going to happen next in Vietnam 2017. What are expectations? What's forecasted for this great country? No matter what either the TPP is coming into place or not. I've been speaking at a few events lately, and main question was what's going to happen to Vietnam after this Trump coming into power, and Trans-Pacific Partnership is not going to happen anymore. Said no worries. Vietnam is already a reality. Vietnam is happening. You don't have to worry about the TPP. Of course, for American companies, this is a big deal. But as we are also advising many other companies that come from elsewhere in the world, this is a bit of disappointment for not only Vietnamese people and American people, but of course, in Vietnam, things are working. The government is taking the right steps to include these new regulations. And as you see here, we have a few headlines from some of the main international newspapers. And then, so what's going to happen now if the TPP doesn't happen anymore? Well, the TPP itself has helped to spur the biggest overhaul of Vietnam's economy in decades. Why? Well, the trade pact is still really useful for the government and for Vietnamese business. Why do I say that? Because now they know the steps they will need to take to really become part of the global economy. On October 2016, for example, the ruling Communist Party adopted a resolution on international economic integration that confirmed Vietnam's commitment to further opening up the economy. So basically, the Finance Ministry has recommended moves to support startup companies, including cutting the corporate income tax rate for small and medium-sized enterprise to as low as 15% from the current 20%. The communist government in Hanoi plans, therefore, to push ahead with more than 30 separate pieces of legislations. And they do this in order to comply with the trade deal, including rules on labor, environment, business foreign trade, and small and medium enterprises. This decision, which is called the Preparation and Action Plan for implement of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, essentially implements the chapter number 5 of the TPP, which is the Customs Administration and Trade Facilitation. According to the WTO director, for Vietnam, the Trade Facilitation Agreement could reduce trade costs by as much as 20%. By cutting a fifth of the cost of trading, this will make a huge difference. I believe it will help boost trade flows in Vietnam. It will support SMEs to start exporting. And in a time when production chains have been globalized, it will help the economy to connect to cross-border production networks. So the TPP might not be here, but we have, as you see, so many other free trade agreements where Vietnam is signatory. It's the only country in ASEAN other than Singapore that has a free trade agreement with the European Union. We have the Eurasian that Dustin's been just talking about. We of course have the ASEAN, and of course, now that TPP might be gone, we have the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and China, that China might be pushing in the next year. So Is it the time for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership? This is a cartoon I got from a Malaysian newspaper, where you can see what's probably going to happen in 2017. We'll see. Again, this is another image where you can see where Vietnam stands. Next, Dustin already commented on this, but what's expected in 2017? Well, you know, after a signature of the agreement earlier this year, now they began the legal review of the text. Also, this is followed by the translation in different languages. Then the Commission needs to present the proposal to the Council of Ministers for the authorization, for the approval of the agreement. And then this needs to be ratified by the European Union Parliament. So when do we expect this to happen? Well, being optimistic, we expect it to be ready for 2018, but we will see. You know what's going on in the European Union these days, so we need to be very patient with it. Yeah, next slide. Sorry, let's click somewhere else. So also, as Dustin mentioned before, the Vietnamese government has issued a decree to cut import taxes for the 2016-2018 period under the free trade agreement between Vietnam and the Eurasian Union. These reductions will be implemented in the following 3 stages that you see here on the slide, and will result in import taxes on some 5,000 tariff lines being dropped to 0. So we, on 2017, we see the we are going to be on the stage 2 of the implementation, and then there are some goods that will benefit, like textile, garments, leather, footwear, and plastic, as well as other key export products such as seafood, electronic, or coffee, rubber, or chemical products. Here you see a map. So Vietnamese products, or products from the Eurasian Economic Union, you see this is a 173 million people bloc, and composed of 4 different countries: Kazakhstan, Belarus, Russia, and Armenia.
Kyrgyzstan.
Kyrgyzstan?
Yeah, doesn't show up. Not on this map, but
yeah.
Also Kyrgyzstan.
All right. So for 2017, you know that the Vietnamese government, or the Vietnamese National Wage Council, updates the minimum monthly wages every year. Normally, we have been seeing a 10% increase on average, but this year they have decided upon a modest 7.3%. In Vietnam, we don't see that much inflation, which is a good thing. So the 7.3% will be over the inflation rate. However, you know, the thing is, most people question whether the minimum wages will cover the minimum living costs in the main cities like Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City. So you can see that the Vietnam's National Wage Council meets the representatives from the trade unions and representatives from the employers to reach to an agreement, and you can see the different zones and the different wages between 2016 and 2017. So for companies that are already here, it will be important to have this updated, and for companies that are coming, of course, they need to look into the new updates. Real estate is actually a new thing here in Vietnam. As you know, as most of you might know, real estate has been open to foreign investment for the last couple of years. There wasn't such a thing before. So now the State Bank of Vietnam is increasing the risk weights of loans for real estate businesses from 150% to 200%. These new regulations will significantly insulate the Vietnamese real estate sector from the risks of bad debt. And these changes underline the importance of tracking legislation in Vietnam. We have the resolution, this resolution 19 2016 that was passed on April this year. This resolution seeks to propel Vietnam into the top 4 ASEAN member states in terms of business climate. You know, sometimes Vietnam is not very well located in this kind of rankings. So the resolution lists out a plan from 2017 until 2020 and highlights the importance of changing trade regulations and government management of import-export products. The resolution aims to simplify administrative procedures and strike down outdated economic laws. And this new resolution lists out several changes that includes all those that you can see down there. Some of you have questions? Okay, let's move on. So again, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to, just please drop the question over there, and we'll be happy to drop you an email later on. So again, these business licensing fees, I'm not gonna talk much about it. Under the newly proposed guidelines, these have been updated, and the companies with registered capital in Vietnam will be subjected to different fee levels. You can see them right there. This webinar is going to be recorded, so if you want to check on the slides, you can find them on our website later on. Regarding transfer pricing, well, Vietnam's Ministry of Finance released a draft, which, if passed, is set to become the largest change to transfer pricing. There are more relaxed thresholds for related entities. Under the proposed changes, the ownership threshold will be raised to 20%, to 25%, sorry, while transactions between otherwise unrelated entities will have to meet or go over 60% of one's party sales or purchases. The increase of both of these thresholds, if implemented, of course, will provide relief to businesses on the verge of current limits, and also reduce the likelihood of unrelated entities being caught up in transfer pricing compliance. There are some exceptions to take into account, and you can read them here. These for small and medium-sized enterprise, which are based on a percentage of ownership or sales. Qualification for transfer pricing compliant exceptions can be secured if both the revenue and the value of a company's related party transactions fall below specific amounts. And last but not least, freight services and related charges. So now shipping operators will have to make public surcharges of freight services for containerized goods, fees and charges of shipping freight services. There's a new decree that will target containerized goods, while bulk shipments that are not containerized will not be subject to the rule. And now more than 40 foreign shipping companies that operate in Vietnam and are involved in 80% of imports and exports of local enterprises. In addition, there is some 90% of Vietnam's exports that are shipped by foreign companies, which account for 100% of containerized goods for European and American markets. And these foreign companies involved in shipping should take note of the new regulations, which will be implemented in 2017.
Finally, some of you might be aware, but we do have these great briefing sites: China Briefing, ASEAN Briefing, Vietnam Briefing, India Briefing, and we actually now also have Indonesia Briefing as well, which publish news on these sorts of updates, as well as some more longer form economic and trade pieces and guides to doing business. So if you want to stay abreast of these changes as they come up in the year, rather than looking back, there's nothing wrong with looking back at them. in a consolidated fashion, but I would recommend these. So wrapping up, I think Oscar, how would you define, or if you could sum up this year for Vietnam in a few words or a few sentences, what are the key points that you'd want to point out?
So the key point is that Vietnam has been going through a lot of different kind of regulation changes, trying to be more adapted to the globalized world. So no matter, we've been seeing that they've been very focused on the different free trade agreements. The good thing is that Vietnam has been trying to adopt their local regulations, the national laws, adapt these laws according to what the free trade agreements were claiming. So the good thing is that Vietnam is now more business friendly. I can say that because from last year to this year, I could see that it was much easier for us to establish companies here. So from that point of view, I think things are going to get much better in 2017. The changes are coming, and I believe that Vietnam is still a very good place, a hot spot for investment, and especially a very good hub for those who are thinking of a location, to find a location in Southeast Asia. So you have anything else to add on?
No, I think that was well put. I think it was a year of good news or neutral news. The country continues to develop. The only thing, and we both said this throughout, but even a lot of people are getting gloomy because of Trump and the TPP. But like we said, even if it dies, the steps Vietnam has taken and will continue to take to be able to even join these agreements as a partner in terms of administrative reforms, legal reforms. Those are all very positive, and those are being taken no matter what, and those are really going to continue to improve the business environment. And I'm not convinced 100% that it's dead, but if it does, I think we'll see a bilateral agreement between the U.S. and Vietnam pop up in a few years, if not some new multilateral framework. So, yeah, thanks for the time, Oscar, and then thank you all.
Thank you all of you listeners, and yeah, again, we'll get back to you for all those who have some questions here. I've seen that they're already being recorded. We've got your email address, so we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
And we know that we see from some of you that unfortunately we had some technical errors or pop-ups during this, so we apologize if there was any issue hearing it, but you can always access the full thing on our website, so it will be posted so you can fill in any gaps, or always feel free to email Oscar and I directly, and if you have any questions that you didn't raise here, we're more than happy to go over them with you. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And have a nice day.